was one of the first artists, and he basically was very famous for his Birds of America, 1827 to 1839, and it's considered one of the greatest ornithological works ever done. He was also committed to painting every bird in North America life-size. His goal was surpassed by an earlier person, Alexander Wilson, and he wanted to surpass him, which he eventually did. He couldn't afford to buy his Alexander Wilson's book, but he was influenced by it. So what he did is, Audubon used to go out, and you have to realize there were no binoculars when Audubon was alive. So he would shoot birds. He would collect them, study them, and then he would pin them up and draw from life. So that was the method he used. And he started working on a body of work that was quite large, and he was kind of a flop in the United States. So in 1826, at the age of 41, he went off to England and Scotland, and he was a huge hit. Everyone loved Audubon. And what he did is he employed an engraver called Havel, Robert Havel Jr., to actually etch all of his plates. So he was treated like royalty in England, and he worked on enough subscriptions to come back and fund the rest of his book. So what he did is he, like I said, he basically decided to paint every bird life-size, so he had to make a plate the size of the largest bird. But he had to fit that on the page, life-size. And the pages were 39.5 by 28.5 inches. Consequently, he had to fill the page with hummingbirds, so we painted a whole bunch of hummingbirds in order to fill this large page. So that's what he did. He painted every bird in North America life-size, and what you would do if you were one of his subscribers is get a print in the mail. He would have the etchings, and then he would have people paint them, and then you would get your page and put it in whatever type of binding that you decided to. So you could realize it took a heck of a long time to get the whole elephant folio. You know, years, because sometimes he was slow in actually producing the work. But what he did was beyond remarkable, and it basically set the stage for future generations. And he has illustrations of things like this, the Carolina parakeets, which are now extinct. So these are the best representations we have of these species right now. Here's a painting of a bald eagle, and it's famous for one reason. He put a self-portrait in it. If you look down here, he painted himself crossing a log with a dead eagle. So he was a bit of a character, but a lot of his backgrounds were in later life painted by other people. But Audubon was a genius. As you can tell, this is not an Audubon. This is me. This is my drawing I did when I was probably 8 years old. I saw a crow on a roof, and even back then I was interested in drawing birds. Influenced by Audubon, and this is a recent piece. So how did I go from doing that crow to this reddish egret, and what type of journey took me to getting enough skill to do this? Well, I'm going to explain it in the show. I also do plate work. These are some plates from Birds of Brazil, so I'm going to go over all of this. My first introduction to really watching birds was through a man called Roger Tory Peterson and the Field Guide to Birds. Someone gave me an old, dusty copy of it, and it just changed my life forever. And little did I realize that in later life I would actually work on the newest edition of Peterson's Field Guide to Birds. I was employed by Houghton Mifflin to go in, and with Photoshop work on updating some of the birds. And you can see there's my name right there. So sometimes when I'm on a birding walk and I want to impress people, I say, hey, open your book and look at the first name. And they go, oh, he must know what he's doing. So one of my earliest, to get serious, one of my earliest influences besides Peterson was a man called Louis Fuertes. And he was from Cornell Ornithology Lab, and he was a man who was probably one of the greatest bird portrait painters of his time. I was given this book, Birds of New York, and when I opened it, I saw his work, which to me was some of the finest bird illustration I've ever seen. In fact, to this day, I don't think there's anyone that much better than Fuertes at doing bird portraiture. When I see a painting of his, I know that's what the bird is going to look like when I see it in life. So it was absolutely spectacular. So he was unfortunately gone by the time I was aware of him, but he influenced everyone, including Roger Tory Peterson. Here's a portrait of his. He just knew the birds and could capture that life force, which is something I'm striving to do today. Another man who was influenced by Fuertes is, can anyone guess who this is? It's not me. This is Roger Tory Peterson. How wonderful it must be to be able to fly anywhere. That was the moment Roger knew he would spend the rest of his life with birds. So we all have moments like that. I can remember things from when I was a child as well. So, as we know, he became kind of the person who invented the field guide. 1934, he started his field guide. And here he is. Here's young Roger working on his field guide. And the first time Houghton Mifflin was hesitant to actually publish this book. So they gave it a test run, and it sold 2,000 copies in 1 week. So they said, I think we have a winner here. So since then, it's been the hallmark of any bird watcher to actually have Peterson's field guide. In this century, no one's done more to really, here's the first field guide. This is what it looked like. And he came up with a unique system. And basically, he said, my identification system is rather more by family. It uses shapes and patterns and field marks in a comparative way. So what he did is he put a little arrow. Can you see it there, all those little lines? And those are the things he invented to look at for the key identification guides for each bird. And he was the first one to do this. So a lot of people painted birds, and there were a lot of field guides before this, but Roger was the first one to put it all together, and he really opened up bird watching to people who never had a way of doing it before. And I contend, a lot of the ecology movement in the 50s and 60s was because of Roger Tory Peterson, because without an ability to go out and look at wildflowers, insects, any part of nature you can think of, without a field guide, you were really unsure what you were looking at. So by opening up the natural world to people, he basically opened up people to wanting to preserve it. So I think he was really important in the ecology movement. So this is the field guide I started with, one of them. And you can see it's one of the, maybe the third edition of the book. Okay. And you can see how he really kind of changed the work. This was from the first edition, the black and white, and a lot of the first edition was done in black and white. Later on, he tried to put more artwork into it, a little bit more naturalistic painting style. So you could see how it evolved into his work in later years. And here's Roger using bird skins. These bird skins are usually borrowed from museums, and a lot of us artists use these when we're doing our bird plate work. We use this for the plumage and pattern. So Roger certainly had a big collection of his own, and he would examine and study the bird skins and use them in his work. Here's Roger with his plate of the ivory-billed woodpecker and the pileated woodpecker. And basically this is important because he actually got to see one in life, which not too many people can say. I don't know if just too many living people can say that. But anyway, this was Roger's, one of his favorite plates. And you can see this is from the last edition of Roger's work. Still has the lines showing the identification and the key elements of each bird, but you can see they're a lot more naturalistic looking and painting and painterly. Funny thing is, I stumbled as an artist into a perfect field, because a lot of field guides of birds don't work as their photographs. They're better off being paintings, and one of the reasons is because you can paint the bird in perfect light with all the key marks, whereas photographs always have shadow or something like that, so it's confusing. So I'm lucky that I'm doing this work, because most of the time field guides have to be paintings. And here's another plate of Roger's work from some of the hummingbirds of Mexico and Central America. Roger, toward the end of his life, was interested in, he kind of paid his dues with his illustration work, and he wanted to get more into fine art painting. So he started doing more of this type of work, and he didn't get a chance to really spend a lot of time doing this, but he did some spectacular paintings of birds with their environments, and he said that was his favorite thing to do at that point. Here's another painting of his. The few times I met with Roger and talked with him, artist to artist, he told me that he got the most enjoyment out of this type of work.